The sub that should have died but didn't. How one US submarine survived the worst damage in World War II history. There's a story from the deep that history books barely scrape. A story of steel bent, hull stressed beyond belief, lives on the brink, and a crew whose grit stitched together a miracle. This isn't myth. This is the real hell-forged tale of the worst damage ever survived by a US submarine in World War II. A story of carnage, courage, and a battered warship that refused to sink. Let's drop below the surface. The sub that took hell and kept going. In October 1944, in the waters near Japan's home islands, the USS Salmon found itself at the raw edge of submarine warfare. Salmon's mission was simple: on paper hunt Japanese shipping and sink it. In practice, this meant diving into the teeth of the enemy and daring the ocean itself to beat you. That day, Salmon didn't just encounter the enemy. It collided violently with their fury. Depth charges, explosive charges set to detonate hundreds of feet below the surface, rained down on Salmon with brutal persistence. These weren't just a few random blows. Japanese anti-submarine ships hammered the sub relentlessly, trying to crush it under seismic shockwaves that could rip steel ribs apart. The pounding was so intense that Salmon's hull actually deformed. Metal bent inward, bulkheads strained, flooding began. According to Navy records, this was one of the most serious damage cases any US submarine had ever endured and survived. Salmon was crippled. Compartments took on water. Electrical systems faltered. Every second under attack was a gamble, with the ocean's weight pressing down like a grave. But she didn't die. She clawed back upward, limping away from the depth charges and finding safety. It was astonishing. Not just that the sub stayed afloat, but that the crew managed to keep her running long enough to escape. This wasn't a small dent or sprung rivet. This was near catastrophic damage. One hellstorm of explosions could have ended the vessel and her men. Instead, Salmon survived. And that alone makes her story one of the most brutal and inspiring in submarine history. Other subs that took a beating but didn't bend. Salmon isn't the only example where luck, steel and sheer will combine to defy the ocean's cruelty, but hers stands among the worst. Another submarine that took an extraordinary beating during World War II was the USS Puffer, SS 268. On Puffer's first war patrol in 1943, after firing on a Japanese tanker, escort vessels pursued her relentlessly. Depth charges detonated close enough to shake the sub's guts. Hatches leaked, gaskets failed, and the rudder was damaged. Water flooded into the aft torpedo room, forcing crew members to form a bucket brigade in brutal conditions to keep bilges under control. Temperatures inside climbed toward 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and oxygen was precious. This wasn't just discomfort, it was life-threatening. Yet, despite that savage pounding and internal breakdowns, Puffer survived and eventually made it back to port. She would go on to survive 8 more war patrols and earn 9 battle stars during World War II. Think about that for a second. Depth charge explosions tearing into your sub's belly, systems failing, heat climbing to oven levels, and still you make it home. That tells you all you need to know about the raw danger submariners faced and the toughness they showed. World War II submarine warfare was, well, savage by design. Submarines like Salmon and Puffer prowled enemy lanes, knowing that just one mistake could mean death in seconds. The underwater battlefield was cruel. Depth charges didn't just threaten a submarine, they could twist a hull like an empty can. Escape wasn't guaranteed, yet somehow these subs survived. Their stories remind us of something critical. The submarine war was won not just by hardware or torpedoes, but by crews hardened beyond belief. Crews who stared down crushing pressure and pure terror, and still, found a way to fight another day. Salmons and Puffers of the Pacific aren't just names in a list of war casualties. They're proof that the worst damage a submarine could take didn't always spell doom. Sometimes it spelled history. Stories of survival against odds that should have been, honestly, insurmountable. That's the core of this tale. Not just how bad the damage was, but how unbelievable the survival was. And if you want to hear more stories like this, jaw-dropping survival against impossible odds, then hit subscribe and share this with your friends. Let's keep these incredible stories alive. Dive deeper with us on 0 Hour World War II, because history like this really deserves to be remembered.